Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some things once found are meant to be lost again. Tonight, we open a file that was sealed for over 3 decades, a case where the official record is a lie and the truth was buried 2 miles beneath the waves. This is the story of the research vessel Odyssey and the classified discovery known only as Project Chimera. Of Odyssey, the story begins not with a bang, but with a whisper, a faint, persistent anomaly on a magnetometer screen in the autumn of 1987. The vessel was the RV Odyssey, a state-of-the-art oceanographic research ship jointly funded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the U.S. Navy. Its stated mission was routine, to map a section of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, specifically the volatile and largely unexplored Charlie Gibbs Fracture Zone. This was a place of immense geological violence, a scar on the Earth's crust where tectonic plates grind against each other. It was a perfect place to hide the mission's true, classified objective: deep-sea surveillance and testing new submarine. The Cold War was in its final frigid years, and the depths of the Atlantic were a strategic chessboard. Leading the civilian science team was Dr. Aris Thorne, a brilliant but iconoclastic geologist and physicist, a man whose theories often outpaced the patience of his peers. Thorne wasn't just mapping the seafloor, he was hunting for something he called abyssal signatures, unique energy patterns he believed could only be produced by geological formations under extreme, unprecedented pressure. For weeks, the mission was a study in monotony. Data was collected, core samples were drilled, and the crew settled into the rhythm of the endless ocean. Then, on October 12th, the whisper became a scream. A junior technician monitoring the deep-tow sonar and magnetometer arrays noticed a deviation. It was a magnetic signature unlike any they had ever recorded, stable, powerful, and geometrically perfect. It did not fluctuate like a natural mineral deposit. It was constant. Simultaneously, the hydrophones picked up a sound. It was incredibly low frequency, on the very edge of human hearing, a rhythmic pulse that the ship's computers initially dismissed as mechanical interference. But the sound wasn't coming from the Odyssey or any other known vessel. It was emanating from the same source as the magnetic field over 2 miles below them. Dr. Thorne was summoned to the lab. According to the few anecdotal accounts that have surfaced, he stared at the data for nearly an hour without speaking, his face a mask of intense concentration. He ordered the ship to hold its position, triangulating the source to a precise coordinate in a trench deeper than any they had planned to survey. He was convinced this was not a mineral deposit or a volcanic vent. It was structured, it was organized, 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 it was officials, the signature I've been looking for my entire life. The official ship's log for that day is heavily redacted, but a leaked draft shows Thorne's urgent request to deploy the Triton. The Navy liaison officer on board, Commander Valeriev, initially refused, citing the extreme depth and the mission parameters. But Thorne, armed with his data, was persuasive. The anomaly was too significant to ignore. It was a discovery of potentially monumental importance. Permission was granted, the target was set, the crew of the Triton IV began their pre-dive checks. They were preparing to descend into a world of absolute darkness and crushing pressure, heading towards a signal that defied all known geology. They were on the verge of a historic discovery, but none of them could possibly know they were also descending towards the end of their careers, the erasure of their work, and for one of them, the end of it. The silence that would soon swallow their discovery was already beginning to gather. The Triton IV was a marvel of its time, a cramped 3-person sphere of titanium and acrylic built to withstand pressures that could pulverize steel. Its mission on October 14, 1987 was to be its deepest and most dangerous dive. The pilots, veteran submariners Dana Sterling and Mike Chen, along with geologist Dr. Evelyn Reed, a protege of Aris Thorne, were sealed inside the submersible. Their world shrank to the hum of life support and the glow of instrument panels. We have a partial shrank to the hum of life support and the glow of instrument panels. We have a partial transcript of their descent, pieced together from a damaged audio cassette believed to have been smuggled off the Odyssey by a sympathetic crew member. It is not an official rap. Solo for the first hour, the conversation is technical. Depth call-outs, system checks, pressure readings. Passing 1,000 meters, all systems green. External temperature dropping. The sunlight vanishes completely within minutes, replaced by an impenetrable, absolute blackness visible through the thick portholes. The only light comes from the Triton's powerful external lamps, which illuminate a blizzard of marine snow, the constant rain of organic detritus from the world above. It is a hypnotic, disorienting sight. At 2,500 meters, they pass through the last vestiges of familiar deep-sea life. The strange, ghostly fish of the abyss give way to nothing. The pressure outside is now over 2.5 tons per square inch. Every groan of the submersible's hull is a reminder of the violent death that awaits them if even a single seal fails. Dr. Reed's voice, initially calm and academic, begins to show a tremor of excitement. The low-frequency hum, which was barely detectable on the surface, is now a tangible presence. The crew can feel it vibrating through the hull of the Triton, a deep, resonant thrum that seems to pulse in time with their own heartbeats. The signal is everywhere, Reed reports. It's not directional anymore. We're inside it, on the surface. Dr. Thorne monitored their progress, his knuckles white as he gripped the console. The magnetic field was growing exponentially stronger as they neared the source. It was beginning to interfere with some of the Odyssey's surface equipment, a fact that deeply troubled Commander Valeriev. The descent continued, slower now, as the pilots navigated the treacherous, unseen terrain of the trench. They were flying blind, relying solely on their sonar, which was starting to produce distorted readings. The magnetic field was playing havoc with their electronics. Passing 4,000 meters, Sterling announces, his voice tight. Hull integrity at 98%. We're approaching the floor. The final minutes of the descent are filled with a tense silence, broken only by the rhythmic ping of the sonar and the deep pervasive hum from outside. Then Dr. Reed gasps, all of them. On the video feed relayed to the Odyssey, the murky darkness was suddenly banished. The lights of the Triton IV struck something that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't rock, it wasn't sediment, it was something else entirely. The descent was over, they had arrived. The silence that followed from the submersible was not due to a malfunction. It was the sound of 3 human beings staring at the impossible. The object that filled the Triton IV's viewports defied geological explanation. It was a structure, vast and crystalline, rising from the abyssal plain like a mountain range designed by a master architect. It was not a natural formation in any sense of the word. Its surface was composed of interlocking, geometric facets, some as large as a city block, angled with a precision that seemed deliberate. The material resembled dark, smoky quartz, but it absorbed the submersible's powerful lights rather than reflecting them, creating an eerie effect of swallowing the light itself. From deep within the structure, a faint internal bioluminescence pulsed in perfect time with the low-frequency hum that Reed's voice, when she finally spoke, was a choked whisper. It's perfect. The angles, they're mathematically precise. This isn't geology, Aris. This is architecture. On the surface, the control room of the Odyssey was stunned into silence. The video feed, though grainy, was undeniable. They were looking at something that their collective scientific knowledge could not process. Commander Valeriev stared at the screen, his face pale. The strategic implications were terrifying. If this was artificial, who built it and when? The structure was immense. The Triton's sonar, now functioning erratically, could not map its full extent. It seemed to stretch for miles in every direction, a single monolithic object of impossible scale. There were no signs of decay, no sediment accumulation that would be expected after millennia on the ocean floor. It looked, as Dr. Reed noted in her log, as if it were placed here yesterday. The pilots Sterling and Chen maneuvered the submersible carefully along one of the colossal facets. The surface was impossibly smooth, with none of the pockmarks or irregularities of natural rock. As they drew closer, they could see intricate fractal patterns etched into the crystalline surface, branching and repeating in a complex, mesmerizing design. It's a single crystal, Thorne murmured in the control room, his voice filled with a terrifying reverence. A single continuous crystalline lattice on a geological. The energy required to form it. He trailed off, unable to complete the calculation. The submersible's external temperature sensors began to register a slight increase in the ambient water temperature, a localized warming effect that had no apparent source. The structure was gently heating the water around it. The hum grew in intensity, and the crew of the Triton reported a strange physiological sensation, a feeling of pressure inside their skulls, a tingling that was not related to the submersible's own vibrations. They were being exposed to a powerful unknown energy field, energy field. Dr. Reed requested permission to take a sample using the Triton's robotic arm. As it made contact with the crystalline surface, a pulse of blue-green light erupted from the structure, and every electronic system on the Triton IV simultaneously failed. The lights went out. The life support switched to its emergency backup. The video feed to the Odyssey cut to static. For 3 agonizing minutes, the Triton IV was dark, silent, and completely alone, adrift next to an impossible object in the deepest, darkest part of the planet. Inside the powerless Triton IV, the 3 crew members were plunged into a terrifying primordial darkness. The only sound was their own breathing and the deep, resonant hum from outside, which now felt as if it were inside their very bones. Emergency chemical lights were activated, casting a sickly green glow over their panicked faces. Dana Sterling, the lead pilot, worked methodically, flipping breakers and running diagnostic checklists, her voice a strained monotone as she tried to reboot the submersible's core systems. After what felt like an eternity, the main power flickered back on. The primary systems came online one by one, but many of the scientific instruments, including the drill arm, were completely fried. The energy pulse from the structure had been a targeted electromagnetic attack. As the external lights reignited, Dr. Reed noticed something that made her forget the terror of the blackout. The area around the submersible was no longer barren, drawn by the light or perhaps by the energy pulse itself. Small, strange life forms were swarming around the Triton's viewports. They were unlike any abyssal creatures she had ever seen. They were not fish, not crustaceans, not cephalopods. They were gelatinous, semi-translucent beings with complex internal structures that glowed with the same blue-green bioluminescence as the crystal monolith. They moved with a fluid, intelligent grace, their bodies shifting and reforming. They had no visible eye. Aris Thorne was already furiously sketching designs for containment units and remote sampling drones, convinced that they needed to bring a specimen to the surface. He argued passionately with Commander Valeriev that the mission had to be extended. This was the single greatest discovery in human history. The commander, however, was looking at a different set of data. The energy pulse that had disabled the Triton had also been detected by military satellites. It was a massive, focused energy discharge from a previously unknown source in a highly strategic area of the Atlantic. To the Navy, this wasn't a biological miracle, it was a While the scientists saw a new Eden, the military saw a weapon. A sample was eventually collected not with the damaged drill, but with a simple scoop attachment. One of the small, glowing creatures was captured and placed in a pressurized, refrigerated containment unit on the Triton. As the submersible began its long, slow ascent back to the Odyssey, the crew watched as the remaining creatures disengaged and retreated back towards the glowing monolith, fading into the darkness. They had made contact, they had collected a sample, and they had proven the existence of a new form of life. They were ascending as heroes, believing they were about to change the world. They were right, but not in the way they imagined. Their discovery would indeed change the world, not by being revealed, but by being buried. As the Triton IV ascended, the focus in the Odyssey's main lab shifted from biology to communication. The rhythmic, low-frequency hum recorded from the abyss was now the central object of scrutiny. A team of acousticians and signal processing experts, led by Aris Thorne himself, worked feverishly to analyze its properties. Initially dismissed as a natural resonance or a geological process, the signal was proving to be far more complex. When visualized as a spectrogram, it wasn't noise, it was a tapestry of interwoven frequencies, rising and falling in a clear, repeating pattern. The pattern was incredibly long, taking just over 72 hours to complete a full cycle before starting again. Thorne, using the ship's powerful mainframe, ran decryption algorithms on the signal, searching for any recognizable mathematical language. The initial results were baffling. The signal did not conform to binary code or any known method of data compression. It was something else entirely, yet it was not random. Buried within the complex wavelets were unmistakable mathematical constants. These were not coincidences, they were universal signature constant. These were not coincidences, they were universal signatures of intelligence, deliberately embedded in the transmission. The signal was a deliberate broadcast, a message in a bottle thrown into the cosmic. They were on the verge of deciphering a communication from a non-human intelligence. The implications were staggering, touching on the deepest questions of philosophy, religion, and humanity's place in the universe. Was this a remnant of an ancient, long-dead civilization? or was the structure itself the litho-intelligence Thorne had theorized about? The source was a rock thinking. The debate raged in the lab. Dr. Reed, back on the surface and examining the captured life form, argued that the signal was biological, a collective hive mind communication of the strange creatures they had witnessed. Thorne, however, was convinced the signal was older, more fundamental. He believed the life forms were he saw the structure as a machine or a computer of unimaginable power, and the signal was its operating system. Commander Valeriev and his naval staff observed these debates with growing alarm. The discovery of intelligent, non-human life was not a scientific curiosity, it was a matter of paramount national security. The transmission contained embedded mathematical constants, which meant it was designed to be understood. What other information did it contain? Weapon designs, a map, a warning? The signal's power output was not insignificant. It was a low-energy broadcast, but it was continuous and emanated over a vast area. Any submarine passing overhead would be bathed in its complex frequencies. Could it even influence the human mind over long periods of exposure? These were the questions that concerned the military. On the evening of October 16th, Thorne's team had a breakthrough. By applying a fractal-based decryption key, they managed to isolate a small, coherent segment of the signal. When converted to a visual pattern, it resolved into a stunningly complex three-dimensional star chart. It was not a view of the sky from Earth. It depicted a star system with multiple planets, seen from a vantage point dozens of light years away. Thorne had done it. He had found the Rosetta Stone for an alien language. He immediately prepared a report, a detailed encrypted burst transmission to be sent to Noah and his academic superiors. Commander Valeriev, however, had already made a different call. Using a secure military channel, he sent his own report to the U.S. Atlantic Command. His message was simple and terrifying. Unidentified deep-sea object of unknown origin and capability confirmed. Demonstrates advanced and signaling properties. Recommend immediate implementation of containment protocol Chimera. The implementation of Protocol Chimera was swift and absolute. Less than an hour after Commander Valeriev's transmission, a reply came back through the same secure channel. It consisted of 2 words: maintain silence. Shortly thereafter, the Odyssey's long-range communications array, the system Dr. Thorne was preparing to use to announce his world-changing discovery, went dead. The official explanation given to the agitated science crew was a catastrophic power surge that had fried the primary transmitter and its backup. It was a plausible, if highly improbable, technical failure. But the ship's chief communications officer knew better. He saw the truth in the command. The Odyssey was now cut off from the outside world. They were adrift in the North Atlantic, a tiny island of forbidden knowledge. Panic began to simmer among the civilian scientists. They were accustomed to the open, collaborative nature of research. The sudden information blackout felt oppressive and wrong. They had made the most important discovery in history, and they were being prevented from telling anyone. Thorne, enraged, confronted Valeriev on the ship's bridge. Their heated argument was reportedly overheard by several crew members. Thorne accused the Navy of attempting to suppress scientific truth, of trying to militarize a discovery that belonged to all of humanity. Valeriev remained impassive, stating only that they were following established protocols for an event of first contact, subaquatic. The term itself was chilling. It implied this was a scenario that had been anticipated, planned for. A protocol already existed for finding something like this. This wasn't improvisation. It was a playbook being executed. The isolation was psychological as well as physical. Crew members were subtly discouraged from congregating in large groups. The naval personnel, once integrated with the civilian team, now kept to themselves, their conversations quiet and guarded. A palpable atmosphere of paranoia descended upon the ship. Every glance seemed to hold a hidden meaning. Every glance seemed to hold a hidden meaning. Every glance Reed had named Luciform was secured in the main lab under armed guard. No further research was permitted. Thorne's data, including the translated star chart, was sequestered. He was locked out of the very systems he had used to make his breakthrough. The Odyssey was no longer a research vessel, it was a floating prison. For 48 hours, the ship held its position over the anomaly, its engines idle. They were waiting. The civilian crew grew more restless with each passing hour. They were witnesses to a miracle, and they were witnesses to a miracle, and they were being treated like criminals. The junior technician who would later leak the fragmented data packet described the feeling in the hidden journal, not as colleagues, but as a security risk. We saw something we weren't supposed to see. The excitement is gone. Now, There's only fear. Fear of what we found, and greater fear of the men with guns who are making sure no one else ever finds it. During this period of radio silence, the low-frequency hum from the abyss continued its unending 72-hour cycle. The signal, the message, the star chart, it was all still being broadcast, a silent testament to the secret they were now forced to keep. The Odyssey was a ghost ship, silent to the world but deafened by the song of the abyss. The outside world knew nothing. To the world, Odyssey was still conducting routine geological surveys. How the outside world, but on board. A quiet, cold war was being waged between the pursuit of knowledge and the iron fist of national security. The waiting ended on the third night of the communications blackout. A new contact appeared on the Odyssey's radar, moving fast and low. It was not a surface vessel. It was a submarine, a black, hulking shape that surfaced without warning in the vessel's floodlights, water streaming from its hull like a leviathan rising from the depths. It was a U, no flags, and bore no identifying marks. It was a U, no flags, and bore no identifying marks. It was a ghost. Within minutes, a team of men dressed in black fatigues, their faces grim and anonymous, boarded the Odyssey via a rigid inflatable boat. They were not standard naval personnel. They moved with an efficient their leader, a tall, severe-looking man in his late 40s who identified himself only as Mr. Kane, informed Commander Valerev that his team was taking control of the Chimera asset. Kane's authority superseded everyone's, including the commander's. He was the physical embodiment of the protocol. The civilian crew was immediately mustered in the ship's mess hall. They were informed that, for their own safety, they were to be confined to their quarters until further notice. Their movement was restricted, their access to labs and equipment revoked. Armed guards were posted in the corridors. The atmosphere of a prison solidified into a stark reality. Dr. Thorne, to read, and the other senior scientist was separated from the rest and taken to the briefing room for individual interrogations. These were not interviews, they were systematic extractions of information. According to the anonymous testimony of one of the guards, the interrogations were long and grueling. Kane's team wanted to know everything, every piece of data, every theory, every private conversation. They were especially interested in the star chart and Thorne's little intelligence hypothesis. They displayed an unnerving level of technical knowledge, asking questions that suggested they knew more about the phenomenon than the scientists who had discovered it. The Special Projects team, as they were called, They brought their own equipment, their own technicians, and their own deep-sea drone. Over the next 24 hours, they conducted their own dives to the structure, their objectives unknown to anyone on the Odyssey. They were not on a mission of discovery, they were on a mission of assessment and containment. The sample of the Luciform creature was taken from the lab by Kane's men and loaded onto the submarine in a specialized cryogenic container. All of Dr. Reed's research notes were confiscated along with it. The shift from scientific inquiry to military seizure was complete and brutal. The civilian crew, locked in their cabins, could only listen to the sounds of their life's work. Junior technician, sensing that everything was about to be erased, took an immense risk. He had access to a secondary data storage unit, a server that created rolling backups. Before his access was revoked, he managed to copy a small, corrupted file onto a floppy disk, a few seconds of the distorted video feed from the Triton's first contact, a fragment of the signal's audio, and a single page from Thorne's notes. He hid the disk in the false bottom of a coffee thermos, a desperate, tiny act of defiance against the overwhelming machine of secrecy that had descended upon them. It was a digital message in a bottle, a seed of truth that would lie dormant for decades. The discovery no longer belonged to science or to the world. It belonged to Mr. Kane and the shadowy organization he represented. The process of erasure was systematic and chillingly thorough. Following the interrogations, Mr. Kane's team began the full-scale confiscation of every single piece of data related to the discovery. They moved through the Odyssey's laboratories and data centers like specters, their actions precise and devoid of emotion. They were not just collecting evidence, they were sanitizing a scene, removing every trace that the event had ever happened. They started with the ship's mainframe, all hard drives containing the raw sonar data, the magnetometer readings, and the signal analysis were physically removed from their racks. They were not wiped. The team brought their own empty server racks to replace them. making it appear as though the originals had simply been upgraded or removed for maintenance. Next, they went after the physical media. Every reel-to-reel tape holding the hydrophone recordings of the signal, every Vuzes and Betamax cassette with footage from the Triton IV's cameras, and every box of printed charts and readouts were gathered. They were packed into anonymous, heavy-duty transport cases and sealed. The scientists were forced to watch as their meticulous records, years of work culminating in this singular moment, were treated like contraband. The confiscation extended to personal effects. The team searched the civilian crew's quarters, taking personal notebooks, journals, audio diaries, and even undeveloped rolls of film. They were looking for anything that could serve as an independent record of the events. Dr. Aris Thorne's cabin was stripped bare. His notebooks filled with complex equations and theoretical models about the structure were a primary target. He protested vehemently, arguing that his notes were personal intellectual property. The response was a cold, silent stare from a guard and the quiet zipping of an evidence bag. This was the moment many of the crew realized the true depth of their predicament. This wasn't just about classifying a discovery, this was about pretending it never existed. It was a meticulous, top-to-bottom rewriting of history in real time. The psychological impact on the crew was devastating. They were being told, through action rather than words, that their reality was invalid. The thing they had seen, touched, and measured was now being declared a state secret so profound that even their memory of it was a liability. The most contentious moment came when the team demanded the original sample logs from the geology lab. Dr. Reed refused to hand them over, making a final stand for scientific integrity. She argued that a chain of custody must be maintained, that the samples and their corresponding data were inseparable. One of Kane's men simply took the binder from her hands, placed it in. The authority was absolute. The final act of confiscation took place in the Triton IV itself. The submersible, which had been brought back into its hangar bay, was swarmed by Kane's technicians. They physically removed its internal data recorders, its navigation logs, and even the sample containment unit where the luciform had been briefly held. They swabbed the interior surfaces for biological residue. When they were finished, the Triton was a clean slate, its historic journey reduced to a blank memory chip and a zeroed-out trip counter. By the time the sun rose, the revoed-out ship, the hollowed-out ship, the heart of its mission, the data was gone. All that remained were the memories of the crew, and it was becoming increasingly clear that amidst the systematic erasure of data, one small act of rebellion was underway. The junior technician, a young man named Ben Carter, knew his time was running out. He was a low-level cog in the scientific machine, responsible for managing data backups and network integrity. His lowly status was a shield. Kane's team was focused on the primary researchers and the core data banks, paying less attention to the redundant secondary systems he maintained. He knew the main servers were being physically removed, but he also knew about a forgotten diagnostic port linked to a tertiary cache, a temporary buffer that held fragmented data for 24 hours before being overwritten. Working in the dead of night during a shift change, Carter locked himself in a small server closet. His heart pounded in his chest. The footsteps of the guards in the corridor outside sounded like drum beats. He used a portable Osborne 1, a primitive luggable computer, and a custom-made cable to jack into the diagnostic port. He had one shot. The connection was unstable. The system was already being partitioned for shutdown. He initiated a data transfer, not even knowing what he was grabbing. The file was small, only 124 megabytes, the maximum capacity of the floppy disk he clutched in his sweaty hand. The transfer was agonizingly slow, the progress bar crawling across the tiny monochrome screen. The file was corrupted from the start, a jumble of data packets from different sources that the cache had randomly saved. As the transfer neared completion, he heard voices approaching. He yanked the cable and shoved the computer back into his bag just as a guard banged on the door, asking what he was doing. Carter, his voice shaking, claimed he was running a final diagnostic before the system was decommissioned. The guard accepted the explanation and moved on. The disc was in his pocket. He had his digital message in a bottle. What he had managed to say was a Frankenstein's monster of data. There were 12 seconds of heavily compressed video from the Triton's external camera. Chimera Project Chimera video. It's a chaotic, glitch-filled clip showing a glimpse of the crystalline structure, distorted by the energy pulse. For a few frames, one of the luciform creatures is visible, a blurry pulsing light against the impossible geometry. The file also contained 30 seconds of audio. It was a raw feed from the hydrophones, capturing the deep resonant hum of the signal, but layered over it was a single, panicked phrase from Dr. Reed, recorded from the Triton's internal comms during the blackout. "It's not a rock. It's not a rock. It's talking back." The most crucial part of the file was a text fragment, a single page from Dr. Thorne's digital notes that had been in the cache. It contained no direct descriptions of the structure, but it was filled with his frantic calculations on the signal source, its power, and its meaning. It included the words, "a non-local consciousness embedded in a crystalline matrix, not a beacon, a mind. It is aware of us." Carter had no idea of the full significance of what he had saved. To him, it was just proof. Proof that they weren't all crazy, that what they had seen was real. He hid the disk, and for over 30 years, it remained a hidden secret, a tiny, corrupted data point waiting for a time when the world might be ready to listen. It was the only piece of primary evidence to escape the purge of the Odyssey, a final with all data confiscated and the ship sanitized. The final phase of Protocol Chimera began, human containment. The entire civilian crew of the RV Odyssey, some 35 scientists and technicians, were flown by military helicopter from the deck of the ship to a remote, undisclosed location. The official story, for anyone who might have been tracking the vessel, would be a simple crew rotation. The reality was far more sinister. They landed at a secure military base, believed to be a nondescript facility in the Nevada desert. They were isolated from each other and subjected to a week of intense debriefings. These were not scientific postmortems. They were psychological operations designed to each crew member was processed individually. They were led into a stark, windowless room, furnished with only a metal table and 2 chairs. On one side sat the scientist or technician. On the other sat a man in a civilian suit, a psychologist, and a uniformed military lawyer. The sessions were recorded, and the message was brutally clear from the outset. They were told that what they had witnessed was now classified at a level far above top secret, a designation so high it didn't even have a name. They were informed that any disclosure of any aspect of the mission, the anomaly, the structure, the signal, the life forms, the military the penalties were not just imprisonment. It was implied, absolute, and final. To solidify this threat, they were presented with thick, legally binding documents. These were not standard non-disclosure agreements. They were lifetime contracts of silence, invoking national security acts and espionage laws so obscure that few had ever heard of them. The documents effectively signed away their First Amendment rights regarding this specific event. They were forbidden from discussing the mission with anyone, including their spouses, their families, and each other. They were to pretend the entire month of October 1987 had been a routine, uneventful mapping expedition. They were given a cover story to memorize, a bland and technical narrative of geological surveys that yielded nothing of interest. They were drilled on this story until they could recite it in their sleep. Any deviation, they were warned, would be detected. The psychological pressure was immense. After days of isolation and intimidation, most were broken and terrified, willing to sign anything to return to their normal lives. The message was clear: your life as you know it can continue, but a part of your memory now belongs to the state. You are a life secret and you will carry it to your grave. Refusal was not an option. One junior biologist reportedly hesitated, questioning the legality of the He was quietly removed from the debriefing schedule and was not seen by the others for the remainder of their time at the facility. When he was returned to the group just before their release, he was pale, gaunt, and silent. He signed the papers without a word. At the end of the week, they were released one by one, given a plane ticket home and a final chilling warning: we will be listening. They were being placed under indefinite surveillance. Their phones, their mail, their careers would be monitored. They were being set free, but they would never truly be free again. They were ghosts, haunted by a memory they could never share. The final piece of the cover-up was the disposal of the primary crime scene, the RV Odyssey itself. The ship was the one major physical asset that could betray the secret. Its very existence was a liability. Its logs, its equipment, its unique configuration for this specific mission could all be scrutinized. A vessel that large could not simply disappear without explanation. A plausible, tragic, and final end had to be engineered. After the civilian crew was removed, a skeleton crew of Navy personnel, along with Kane's team, took the Odyssey on its final voyage. They steered the ship directly into the path of a forming hurricane, a powerful late-season storm that was churning its way across the official narrative was already being drafted. On October 28, 1987, a distress call was logged from the RV Odyssey. The transmission was brief and garbled, citing catastrophic engine failure and hull breach in hurricane-force winds. Then, silence. Search and rescue operations were officially launched, but they were a charade. The planes and cutters were deliberately sent to the wrong search grids, hundreds of miles from the Odyssey's actual location. For 3 days, the news carried stories of the heroic but futile search for the missing research vessel. The search was officially called off on October 31st. The RV Odyssey and its crew were declared lost at sea, but the truth was far colder. The Odyssey was not lost in a storm. Declassified weather data shows that while the ship was near the hurricane, it was in a navigable sector. The distress call was faked. The ship was intentionally sailed to a specific predetermined location, the deepest part of the Puerto Rico Trench, nearly 5 miles deep. There, the skeleton crew was evacuated by the same unmarked submarine that had initiated the takeover. Once the crew was clear, demolition charges that had been placed on the ship's keel were detonated. The RV Odyssey, the vessel that had carried humanity to its most profound discovery, was scuttled. It sank in minutes, plunging into its final resting place is miles deeper and hundreds of miles away from where it was reported lost, ensuring its wreckage would never be found by accident. The sinking of the Odyssey was a masterstroke of misdirection. It not only eliminated the primary piece of physical evidence, but it also created a convenient explanation for the disappearance of the mission's data and, most importantly, its lead scientist. The official record was now sealed. The ship was gone, the data was gone, and according to the official report, the entire crew had gone down with it. Martyrs to science. The lie was perfect, impenetrable, and backed by the full weight of the United States government. The silence was now absolute. While the rest of the civilian crew was being processed and released, the lead scientist, Dr. Aris Thorne, was singled out. He was deemed too brilliant, too stubborn, and too dangerous to be released back into the world. His mind held the most complete picture of the discovery, from the initial theoretical hunt to the final terrifying conclusion that the structure was a conscious entity. He was not just a witness, he was the prophet of this new reality, and his voice could never be allowed to be heard. Thorne was separated from the others at the Nevada base. He was never subjected to the same debriefing process. While his colleagues were being threatened into silence, Thorne was engaged in a different kind of conversation. According to second-hand accounts from a retired intelligence officer familiar with the Chimera file, Thorne was taken to a more secure, underground facility, possibly the infamous Area 51 or a similar black site. There, he met with the highest echelons of the intelligence and scientific communities. They didn't want to silence him. They wanted to recruit him. They wanted his brain. They recognized that Thorne was the only person who could potentially understand, and perhaps even communicate with, the entity they had found. They offered him a new life, a new identity, and unlimited resources to continue his research in secret under their. He would lead the clandestine effort to study what was now being called the Thorne Object. Thorne, a fierce advocate for open science and the sharing of knowledge for the betterment of humanity, refused. He saw their offer not as an opportunity, but as a perversion of his life's work. He believed the discovery was too important to be weaponized or hidden away by any single government. It belonged to the world. His refusal sealed his fate. He could not be recruited and he could not be released. He had become a permanent liability. The official story of the Odyssey's sinking provided the perfect solution. Dr. Aris Thorne was listed among the crew members lost at sea. His death was officially certified. A funeral was held. His family received a folded flag and condolences from a grateful nation for his ultimate sacrifice in the pursuit of knowledge. While his family mourned, a quiet professional team descended on his life. His home, his university office, and his private research archives were sanitized. This was not a clumsy burglary, it was a surgical removal of his existence. Every research paper, every notebook, every letter that hinted at his more unconventional theories was removed. His colleagues were told his archives were being transferred to a national repository to be preserved in his honor. In reality, they were being transferred to an incinerator, whose name was slowly scrubbed from academic. Within a few years, the memory of Aris Thorne, once a giant in his field, began to fade into obscurity. What actually happened to him remains the darkest part of the Chimera mystery. The anonymous intelligence source claims Thorne was held in isolation for several years, his knowledge extracted through any means necessary. Other, more grim theories suggest he was eliminated shortly after his refusal. The one certainty is that after October 1987, Dr. Aris Thorne, the man who found a mind in the deep, was never seen or heard from again. He vanished from the world, a ghost in the machine he had discovered. For over 30 years, Odyssey remained buried, a perfectly executed cover-up. The surviving crew members kept their vow of silence. The terror of the debriefings, a fresh wound even decades later. They built new lives, new careers, always carrying the weight of the secret. The world moved on, and the tragic loss of a research vessel in a storm became a minor footnote in maritime history. The silence was broken in 2002, not by a government leak or a declassified document, but by a deathbed confession. Ben Carter, the junior technician who had copied the corrupted data file, was dying of cancer, haunted by a secret for his entire adult life. David Carter, now a documentary filmmaker, had grown up with a father who was distant and haunted, a man who would sometimes stare at the ocean for hours. He knew his father had been through a trauma at sea, but he had always respected his silence. In his final days, Ben Carter told his son everything. He described the anomaly, the crystalline structure, the strange life forms, and the terrifying military takeover. And then, from a locked box he had kept hidden for over 3 decades, he produced a coffee thermos. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was the 144 megabyte floppy disk. They tried to erase it. Ben Carter died 2 days, a bet. He left his son with an incredible, dangerous inheritance, a single, fragile piece of proof. David Carter, the filmmaker behind this very documentary, now had a mission. He was not an oceanographer or a physicist. He was a storyteller, and he now had the most important story in human history resting on a piece of obsolete magnetic tape. His investigation, which forms the basis of our report, began with that single disk. Getting the data off the disk was the first challenge. It required sourcing a vintage 1980s computer with a working 3.5-inch drive. When he finally accessed the file, it was the corrupted jumble his father had described. A few seconds of glitchy video, a burst of audio, a fragment of text. For David, it was the breadcrumb trail. It was the key that could potentially unlock the entire conspiracy. He began the painstaking process of finding the other members of the Odyssey's civilian crew. It was a monumental task. The official crew manifest was classified, and the names he had from his father's stories were common. He spent months cross-referencing university alumni records, professional publications, and old news articles, searching for a group of scientists who had all simultaneously dropped off the grid or changed careers in late 1980s. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to find them. Most refused to talk, the fear still palpable in their voices after 30 years, a slammed phone, a curt email, but a few, now elderly and perhaps feeling their own mortality, were willing to listen. The long silence was beginning to crack. With the floppy disk as his only piece of physical evidence, David Carter assembled a small, trusted team of modern experts to analyze its contents. For the first time, the impossible geometry of the crystalline structure became clear. The clean, perfect angles and the vast scale were visible, confirming it was not a natural formation. The software also managed to isolate the frames containing the luciform creature. What had been a blurry pulse of light was resolved into a complex, semi-translucent organism with a visible internal lattice of light, confirming Dr. Reed's description of a life form with no recognizable anatomy. The most significant work, however, was done on the 30-second audio clip. A leading acoustic engineer, Dr. Miles Jennings, ran the audio through a state-of-the-art spectrum and what remained was the pure signal from the structure. Dr. Jennings was stunned. In nature, signals decay. They lose complexity. They are subject to entropy, he explained in an interview. This signal does not. It's perfectly coherent, as if it's being generated right next to the microphone, not 2 miles away through water. The complexity is off the charts. It's more like a symphony than a sound. Using powerful computers, Jennings was able to map the signal structure in 3 dimensions, creating a visual representation of its frequencies. The result was not a chaotic waveform, but an intricate architectural model. It was a 3D spectrogram that looked like a blueprint for a city. It was, in his words, undeniably artificial. He confirmed the presence of the mathematical constants that Aris Thorne had discovered, but he found something more. He found evidence of quantum entanglement encoded in the phase relationships of the frequencies, a scientific principle that was purely theoretical in 1980. Whoever or whatever built this, Jennings concluded, has a grasp of physics that is centuries, if not millennia, ahead of our own. The final piece of the puzzle was the text fragment from Thorne's notes, a non-local consciousness embedded in a crystalline matrix. A non-local consciousness embedded in a crystalline matrix, not a beacon, a mind. It is aware of us. When presented with the visual and audio analysis, Thorne was talking about a sentient geology, a planetary-scale quantum computer. The energy pulse that hit the Triton wasn't an attack, it was a handshake, a data transfer. The structure wasn't just aware of them, it was trying to communicate, and its language is pure physics. The star chart wasn't just a map, it was likely its address. The fragments, once analyzed with modern technology, painted a picture far more profound and terrifying than Ben Carter could have ever imagined. The evidence was no longer just a conspiracy theory, it was data, demanding a conclusion that was too fantastic to believe, yet too consistent to ignore. Armed with the new analysis, David Carter renewed his efforts to find a crew member willing to speak on the record. After dozens of rejections, he received an anonymous encrypted email. It read, "I was the geologist on the Triton. I will talk, but you will not use my name. You will not show my face." The email provided coordinates to a remote diner in rural Oregon. David went alone. He met alone in her late 60s, her face etched with a lifetime of carrying a heavy secret. It was Dr. Evelyn Reed. She agreed to an audio-only interview, her voice altered to protect her identity. Her testimony is the first and only first-hand account from someone who saw the structure with their own eyes. Her voice, though disguised, was steady and clear. She described the descent, the feeling of the hum vibrating through the submersible's hull, and the moment the floodlights revealed the monolith. "You have to understand," she said, "we were prepared for anything. Strange rocks, weird fish, unnamed volcanoes. We were not prepared for that. It was like being an ant at the foot of a skyscraper, but the skyscraper was singing and it was alive." She confirmed the details of the discovery, the perfect geometry, the internal light, the energy-based life forms, and the electromagnetic pulse that disabled their systems. She spoke of Aris Thorne not just as a mentor, but as a visionary who had been vindicated in the most spectacular way imaginable. Aris always said he believed consciousness wasn't limited to biological brains. He said that under the right conditions of pressure and energy, a crystalline lattice could achieve sentient thought over geological time. "We found it. He found it. He found it. He found it." Her tone shifted when she described the military takeover. The scientific wonder was replaced by a cold, quiet anger. "They stole it," she said simply. "They stole the greatest moment in human history. They came on board and they put a gun to the head of God and they told it to shut up. They told it to shut up. They told it to shut up. They told us we were protecting humanity from a truth it couldn't handle. They were hoarding. They were afraid of what it would mean for their power, for their religions, for their control." She recounted the debriefings in Nevada, the threats, and the crushing weight of the nah. She had changed her name, abandoned her career in geology, and spent 30 years as a librarian, hiding from the ghost of her past. She had never spoken of it to anyone. "You carry it every day," she confessed, her voice cracking for the first time. "Every time you look at the stars, you wonder. Every time you hear a strange noise, you remember the hum." She confirmed the authenticity of the data on the floppy disk and provided the context that made it undeniable. The witness had finally spoken. The silence was broken. With the forensic analysis of the data and the explosive, albeit anonymous, testimony of Dr. Evelyn Reed, our investigative team had a credible, verifiable case. The next logical step was to confront the official sources, to present our findings to the government agencies involved and demand a response. We compiled a comprehensive briefing package, including the restored video, the signal analysis, a transcript of Reed's testimony, and a detailed timeline of the events of October 1987. We formally submitted this package to the public affairs offices of the Department of the Navy and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the two parent organizations of the office. We requested an interview, a statement, or at the very least, access to the declassified mission records for the RV Odyssey. The initial response was silence. For weeks, our emails went unanswered, and our phone calls were routed through an endless labyrinth of administrative assistance. It was a classic bureaucratic stonewall, a tactic designed to exhaust and deter inquiry. We persisted, escalating our requests and informing them that we intended to publish our findings with or without their comment. Finally, we received a response. It was not a phone call or an offer for an interview. It was a single, coordinated email sent from both the Navy and NOAA at the exact same time. The statement was a masterpiece of non-denial denial, carefully worded to say nothing while appearing to address the issue. It read in part, in response to your inquiry, records pertaining to the 1987 North Atlantic expedition of the research vessel RV Odyssey F, RV Odyssey V, Odyssey remain classified under 50 U.S.C. J 444 in the interest of national security. The loss of the Odyssey was a maritime tragedy, and our condolences remain with the families of the dedicated crew and scientists who were lost. Dr. Aris Thorne is officially listed as deceased in that incident. We have Leo Foes was classified, which lent credence to our story, but it refused to address any of the specific evidence we had presented. It used the official story of the tragedy as a shield, a way to dismiss any further questions as insensitive to the victims. It was a public relations masterclass in saying no comment in 100 official-sounding words. We followed up, asking specifically why a 35-year-old geological survey would still be classified for national security. We asked about Project Chimera. We asked about the debriefings in Nevada. We asked about the response to these follow-up questions was even more succinct. We have no further comment. The official denial, in its cold bureaucratic finality, was almost more damning than a confession. The refusal to engage with the evidence, the blanket invocation of national security to cover a supposedly routine scientific mission, and the reaffirmation of a cover story we knew to be false all pointed to a single conclusion. Our investigation was not just close to the truth, it was the truth. They were not denying that something happened. They were simply stating, with the full and unassailable authority of the state, that we were not allowed to know what it was. The file was not just closed, blocked by the official wall of silence. Our investigation pivoted to a different, more arduous path, the paper trail. If a secret operation of this magnitude occurred, it would have left financial footprints, however faint. We enlisted the help of investigative journalists who specialize in navigating the labyrinthine world of federal budgets and declassified government archives. They began a deep dive into the fiscal records of the Navy and related intelligence agencies for the years 1987 through 1997. The work was tedious, involving the review of thousands of pages of procurement records, budget annexes, and congressional reports, most of which buried deep within the sub-annex of a Department of Defense appropriations bill for a special access program, was a single-line item. It was a multi-million-dollar expenditure, far too large for a simple research project, allocated for an operation codenamed Project Chimera. The dates of the expenditure aligned perfectly with the Odyssey's mission and its aftermath. The project was described in the documents with vague, almost meaningless language: deep-sea asset recovery and containment. There was no mention of a specific location or vessel, but the details were there, hidden in the numbers. There were charges for unscheduled special ordnance, consistent with scuttling charges. There were costs for extended personnel debriefing at a secure domestic facility, matching the story of the Nevada containment. And there was a massive budget for long-term signal analysis and monitoring, indicating that the effort to understand the hum from the abyss did not end when the Odyssey was sunk. It had just begun in secret. The name Chimera itself was a clue. In Greek mythology, the Chimera was a monstrous hybrid creature composed of the parts of multiple animals. The code name was likely chosen to reflect the nature of the discovery, something that was part geology, part biology, and part intelligence, a hybrid that fit into no known category. Digging deep, entire pages were blacked out, but a few isolated words and phrases survived the censor's pen. Words like non-terrestrial, coherent signal, biologicals, and Thorne hypothesis confirmed. These fragments, when pieced together with the testimony and the data from the floppy disk, created an undeniable mosaic. The paper trail proved that the events were real. It confirmed the cover-up had a name and a budget. Most chillingly, we found a single, mostly redacted memo from a high-level naval intelligence officer dated November 1987. Only one sentence was left partially intact. It read, recommend indefinite continuation of acoustic quarantine around the Chimera. They created a permanent secret cordon around the location, not just to keep people from finding it, but perhaps to keep the signal from getting out. The paper trail showed that the cover-up wasn't just an event in 1987. It was an ongoing operation, a secret that has been actively managed and maintained at enormous expense for over 3 decades. The discovery of the acoustic quarantine mentioned in the declassified memo prompted a new line of inquiry. If the US Navy had secretly cordoned off a section of the North Atlantic, what other strange incidents might have occurred in that region over the past 35 years? We began cross-referencing the approximate coordinates of the Odyssey's discovery with public and semi-public databases of maritime incidents, unexplained phenomena, and declassified military reports. A disturbing pattern began to emerge. The Charlie Gibbs fracture zone has always been a treacherous stretch of water, but in the years following 1987, the area became a hotspot for bizarre and often tragic events. In 1994, a French fishing trawler, the Le Solitaire, Chifevolo Forage class radio transmission reported that all of their electronic navigation equipment was failing simultaneously. No wreckage was ever found. In 2003, a NATO submarine on a training exercise reported a catastrophic sonar failure after encountering a massive stationary acoustic anomaly in the same area. The submarine was forced to surface and was escorted up a geological event, but the description of the anomaly in the leaked parts of the log closely matched the signal from Project Chimera. Perhaps the most compelling data came from civilian oceanographic researchers, multiple independent research crews. These signals are often dismissed as instrument errors, seismic activity, or even whale songs that have been distorted by deep-sea topography. However, when we obtained the raw data from 2 of these cruises and had it analyzed by Dr. Miles Jennings, he confirmed that the signals contained the same complex mathematical structure as the one recorded by the Odyssey. The signal is still being broadcast. The entity is still there. It is still talking. We also spoke with a retired commercial airline pilot who flew transatlantic routes for 20 years. He recounted on the condition of anonymity, a no-fly zone that was never on any official chart. Pilots knew through word of mouth to avoid a certain patch of ocean. On Dubujogo Dr. Baila, those who strayed too close would often experience severe radio interference and compass deviations. We just called it the glitch, he told us. A spot in the middle of nowhere where the rules of physics seem to get a little fuzzy. We learned to just add 20 miles to our flight path and not ask questions. All of these disparate events, a lost trawler, a disabled submarine, ghost signals, an unofficial no-fly zone, point to a consistent ongoing phenomenon. The acoustic quarantine is real. The area is being actively managed. The incidents suggest that the signal from the structure may be growing stronger or changing in some way, its effects bleeding out beyond the original containment zone. The cover-up is not just about keeping a secret, it's about managing an active and unpredictable force of nature or technology that they still do not understand and cannot control. To fully understand the magnitude of what was found, we must return to the man who predicted it, Dr. Aris Thorne. Who was he, and how could he have conceived of something so far outside the bounds of conventional science? Our investigation led us to university archives, where we unearthed some of his early pre-mission academic papers and lecture notes. What we found was a portrait of a man who was considered a genius by some and a heretic by others. Thorne was a geophysicist by trade, but his true passion was the intersection of physics, information theory, and consciousness. Long before the Odyssey mission in the late 1970s and early 80s, he published a series of theoretical papers on what he argued that the complex crystalline structures of certain minerals, when subjected to immense and sustained geological pressure and geothermal energy over millions of years, could theoretically form a processing substrate capable of emergent consciousness. He proposed that silicon-based life didn't have to be biological. It could be geological. He was, in essence, describing a naturally occurring quantum computer the size of a mountain. His theories were widely dismissed by the mainstream scientific community. They were seen as unfalsifiable, more philosophy or science fiction than actual science. He was denied tenure at one university and ridiculed at conferences. But in his papers, Thorne laid out a specific set of signatures he believed would identify a sentient geofact. These included A stable, high-intensity magnetic field with geometric properties, the emission of a complex, information-rich, low-frequency signal, localized gravitational and thermal anomalies, and the fostering of a unique symbiotic ecosystem not based on known biological principles. It is a perfect point-by-point description of what the RV Odyssey would discover years later. He wasn't just a lucky explorer who stumbled upon an anomaly, he was following his own map. He had a theory, and he convinced the Navy and NOAA to fund an expedition to a location. The authorities didn't just silence a random discovery, they silenced the man who held the key to understanding it. His Thorne hypothesis, as it was called in the redacted Chimera documents, was not just a theory, it was the operating manual. His refusal to cooperate with the military was not just an act of defiance, it was the single greatest loss in the history of the cover-up. They had captured the artifact, but they had lost the one person who might have been able to translate its language. Was he silenced because he was right? The evidence suggests something more. He was silenced because he understood the implications more than anyone. In his final, unpublished paper, a manuscript rescued from a colleague's archives, he wrote, "If we confirm the existence of a planetary intelligence, we must confront the possibility that we are not the dominant life form on our own world. We may be little more than a brief biological rash on the surface of a much older, deeper mind." This was the truth they couldn't handle. All along, sleeping beneath our feet, we are left where we began, with a whisper from the deep and a profound, deafening silence from those in power. The file on Project Chimera is officially closed, but the questions it raises remain wide open, echoing in the abyss. Let us summarize what the evidence compels us to conclude. In 1987, a team of scientists, guided by the prescient theories of Dr. Aris Thorne, discovered a massive, artificial crystalline structure on the floor of the North Atlantic. This object, which may be an artifact, a machine, or a life form, emits a complex signal containing the hallmarks of intelligence. It is surrounded by a unique ecosystem that draws energy directly from it, a new domain of life. This discovery was immediately governed under a protocol named Chimera. The data was confiscated, the research vessel was scuttled, the civilian crew was threatened into lifelong silence, and the lead scientist, Dr. Aris Thorne, was vanished from existence. For over 3 decades, this secret has been actively maintained through an acoustic quarantine of the site and a steadfast official policy of denial and misdirection. But the truth has a way of surfacing. A single act of defiance, of policing, a single act of defile, saved on a floppy disk, survived the purge. That seed of evidence, combined with modern forensic analysis, a brave first-hand witness, and the trail of budgetary, the shadow of the... What is the true nature of the Thorne object? Is it a beacon, a computer, a dormant spaceship, or a conscious geological mind, as Thorne himself believed? What is the purpose of its unending signal? Is it a message, a warning, or simply the sound of a being thinking? And what has the secret cabal that controls Project Chimera learned about it in the last 35 years? Do they understand the signal? Have they attempted to communicate? The silence from the government is no longer just about hiding a past event. It is about controlling an active, ongoing situation of unimaginable importance. They are not just hiding the discovery of non-human intelligence, they are hiding our first contact, a contact that is still underway. The file may be 2 miles beneath the waves. In a world of crushing pressure and absolute darkness, something is waiting. It is singing a song of mathematics and physics into the endless dark. We have heard a single fleeting note of that song, but the full symphony and the truth of what it means for humanity remains the most profound and terrifying secret on planet Earth.